I lost my memory. My memories are stuck at a year ago, when I was most deeply in love with Luis. He took care of me in every possible way, holding me every night, kissing me as his voice trembled. Be good, please. Never remember. Later, I remembered everything. The day I was kidnapped along with his first love. He chose to save her, and I went through inhuman torment. Chapter 1. I started having frequent dreams. In the dream, a woman lay on the ground. Several men stood around her, letting out malicious laughter as they slowly approached. He abandoned you. We won't kill you. Let us have some fun with you, and we'll let you go. The woman couldn't move. She was abused one after another. Later, everyone left, satisfied, leaving her lying there with her clothes in disarray. Blood kept flowing from her head. I jolted awake, sitting up and gasping for air. No! Jane, what's wrong? Luis seemed to be a light sleeper. He sat up immediately, looking at me in panic. Still shaken, I threw myself into his arms, seeking comfort. Did you have a nightmare? Luis gently wrapped his arms around me, stroking the back of my head. Don't be scared. I'm here. It's all fake. But it felt strangely real, buried in his arms. I told him about the nightmare. The moment I finished speaking, his body stiffened. Luis? I looked up at him. He snapped back to himself and forced a smile. It's nothing, Jane. Dreams aren't real. Don't think about it anymore. Luis held me and comforted me for quite a while. Only then did I calm down a little and lie back to sleep. This time, Luis held me tightly in his arms, half asleep. I felt him kissing me over and over, his body trembling slightly, as if he was afraid. Before I fully fell asleep, I heard him murmur, "Be good, please. Never remember." Chapter 2. The next day, Luis took me to the hospital for a follow-up. The doctor said the blood clot in my brain was gradually dissipating, and I would likely recover my memory soon. In the next second, Luis's face turned pale instantly. On the way home, he held my hand tightly without saying a word. Luis, what's wrong? I shook his hand lightly. Suddenly, he pulled me into an empty alley and pinned me against the wall, kissing me almost frantically. Jane, promise me you'll never leave me, okay? Then he kissed me again. My face grew warm, and I pushed him slightly. Let's go home first. Luis looked awful, still trapping me in place. He cupped my face with both hands. Don't reject me, baby. I blinked. Why did it feel like he was about to cry? Fine. I loosened my resistance and let him kiss me. Chapter 3. As soon as we stepped into the house, Luis pulled me into his arms again and leaned down to kiss me. He lifted me up and carried me toward the bedroom. Just when I thought something was about to happen, he suddenly stopped without any warning. I didn't understand why. Ever since I woke up, Luis had stopped doing this with me. Before, he used to cling to me, coming to me every couple of days. Luis had been kissing my ear, but then his movements froze, and he simply held me in silence. I'm sorry, Jane. I'm sorry. At the time, I didn't understand what he meant. It wasn't until I remembered everything that I finally realized. It wasn't that Luis didn't have needs. He just thought I was dirty. Chapter 4. The atmosphere turned stiff. I let him hold me, but I had no idea what to say. Then Luis's phone rang. He took it out, glanced at it, and his expression stiffened for a brief moment before he got up and went to the living room to answer it. For some reason I couldn't explain, I walked toward the door, curious about that phone call. Luis's voice came through faintly. Stop bothering me. From beginning to end, I've only ever loved her. Even if that day comes, I'd rather die than leave her. The information was too fragmented, I couldn't piece anything together. But the fog in my heart grew thicker and thicker, until Aurelia appeared. Chapter 5. That day, Luis seemed a bit flustered before leaving. As usual, he reminded me, "Be good and wait for me at home. Something urgent came up at the company. I'll be back as soon as I'm done." Then he emphasized again, "Don't go out, no matter what." He picked up his car keys, then leaned down and kissed me again. The sky outside was gloomy, a sign of an incoming storm. A sudden uneasiness rose in my chest, and I reached out to grab his hand. You have to come back quickly. Luis curved his lips into a smile. Don't be scared, baby. I'll be back soon. As he spoke, he gently freed his hand from mine and walked toward the entrance. I stood there, watching his back. He left in a hurry, unlike usual. He didn't turn around to look at me before opening the door. I felt a little disappointed, but when I turned back, I noticed the car keys on the coffee table. Luis had taken the wrong keys. I quickly grabbed them and rushed out to chase after him. The elevator went straight down to the parking garage. I found his car very quickly. Just as I took a step forward, I suddenly froze, staring at the two people inside the car without blinking. Luis was holding a woman, kissing her. When the woman's face was fully revealed, it felt as if something in my mind snapped. The doctor had once said that under certain stimuli, I might instantly recover my memory. Of course, it was only a small possibility, but when Aurelia appeared, I almost immediately remembered everything. Chapter 6. 3 months ago, Aurelia asked me out and openly provoked me. She was Luis's first love. Her reappearance in front of us was solely to take Luis back. She spoke with absolute certainty. Luis has loved me from beginning to end. It's always been me. You were just a distraction when I wasn't around, nothing more than something to pass the time. At that time, all I wanted was to go back and ask Luis face to face. Whatever it is, I want to hear it from him personally. I threw those words out and left. It was getting late, and there was hardly anyone on the road. A van suddenly stopped beside me. 2 men got out, their expressions fierce and menacing. They dragged me straight into the vehicle. Aurelia was also inside, tied up just like me. The people who kidnapped us were former rivals from Luis's company. He had been found guilty of embezzling a huge amount of company funds. When the police went to his house, he had already fled. He suspected that Luis had reported him, and held a grudge because of it. Chapter 7. When Luis arrived, I was just about to call out for help, but I noticed he was staring straight at Aurelia, like something out of an over-the-top melodrama. Even though Luis had brought the ransom, he was told he could only take one person. Only then did I understand why he hadn't called the police and came alone. He knew the kidnappers were desperate men. He didn't dare gamble with Aurelia's life. Luis. My whole body was bound tightly with ropes as I called out to him softly. He looked deeply into my eyes. After a moment, he finally made his decision. Looking at me, he spoke with difficulty. I'm sorry, Jane. Aurelia has a heart condition. I can't just ignore her. I know you've always been brave, right? Wait for me. I'll come back for you. The light in my eyes dimmed instantly, as I was pinned down by several men. The last thing I saw was Luis carrying Aurelia away. Chapter 8. Calling it abuse would not be an exaggeration. My body was covered in wounds. The injury on my head came from struggling. Someone grabbed my hair and slammed me against the concrete floor. I don't know how long it took before everything finally ended. The entire abandoned factory was left with only me. The blood from my head kept flowing, and my consciousness gradually faded. On the verge of losing all strength, I saw Luis rushing over. His face was pale as he trembled and picked me up. He was crying. His hoarse voice kept apologizing. I'm sorry, Jane. I'm sorry. I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you. Please forgive me. I was taken to the hospital at one point during my stay. I briefly woke up. Weakly, I half opened my eyes. Luis sat by my bedside, one hand holding mine, the other holding his phone as he made a call. He didn't notice that I had woken up. In a low voice, he said to the person on the other end, "It's my fault for what happened to Jane. I won't leave her. Stop contacting me. We can't call the police." Luis said, "I can't let Jane be." His grip on my hand tightened, and he took a deep breath before continuing. "I can't let others know what happened to Jane. It's better if those people disappear completely, so they won't show up in front of her again." As soon as he finished speaking, I couldn't hold on any longer and fell unconscious again. When I woke up the next time, my memory had returned to a year ago. Luis talked about making it up to me, but he wasn't even willing to call the police to seek justice for me. In his eyes, what had happened to me was something shameful, something that couldn't be exposed. He felt guilty toward me, yet at the same time thought I was tainted. My memory loss only allowed him to continue hiding everything. Guilt-free. Chapter 9. The two people in the car finally finished that long kiss. As if sensing something, Luis looked toward me. His expression instantly turned panicked. He immediately opened the car door and walked toward me. Jane, listen to me. Under my increasingly cold gaze, he couldn't say another word. After a long pause, his face turned ashen, and he spoke as if resigning himself. You remembered everything, didn't you? I stared at him for a few seconds without responding. Instead, I shifted my gaze to Aurelia, who was stepping out of the car. Jane? She asked tentatively, do you still remember who I am? I knew I was already on the verge of breaking down, but I still forced myself to suppress the trembling and asked her. I'll only ask you one thing. Did you have anything to do with that kidnapping? Aurelia frowned immediately, disbelief written all over her face. You think I worked with them? What are you thinking, Jane? Don't tell me just because you went through that, you've developed some kind of victim paranoia? Aurelia! Luis raised his voice sharply. I was so furious I laughed instead, stepping closer to her. Before she could react, I grabbed her hair and slammed her head onto the car hood beside us. It was probably a car that hadn't been used for a long time. The surface was covered in a thick layer of dust. Ah! Aurelia screamed. Next time you can't control that mouth of yours, I'll sew it shut for you. Luis pulled me away, and I turned around and slapped him across the face. He didn't get angry. He simply pressed his lips together and tried to explain. I know Aurelia. She's not that kind of person. Jane, you must have misunderstood her. Look at this man in front of me, the man I had been dating for 4 years. Last night, he was still holding me, kissing me, and today, he was speaking up for another woman. Chapter 10. Half an hour later, I stood by the living room window, silently watching Luis. The shock of suddenly regaining my memory was overwhelming. I was already on the brink of losing control, but at the very least, I didn't want to show that side of me in front of Luis. After driving Aurelia away, he had been sitting on the couch in silence, smoking. Finally, Luis crushed out his cigarette and looked up at me. Jane, let's get married, he said sincerely. Let's forget everything, okay? I'll also restrain myself, stop thinking about those things, and slowly accept you. My hand gripped the windowsill so tightly it hurt, yet I still smiled. Luis, why don't you just go die? He thought he had made a huge concession, yet I was still being ungrateful. His tone became slightly impatient. Jane, what else do you want from me? I'm already forcing myself to ignore what happened that day. I'm willing to spend the rest of my life making up for your trauma. What more do you want? Besides me, do you even have any other options? If other men find out you were gang raped, they'll only stay as far away from you as possible. I waited patiently for him to finish his last word before picking up a flower pot beside me and smashing it toward him. Luis, say it! What was I? Say it out loud. In the end, I couldn't hold back. I became a completely irrational madwoman. I grabbed everything within reach and hurled it at Luis. You piece of trash! From his initial panicked apologies, he eventually fell into silent observation. The coffee table, the TV, the glass. I picked up a golf club and swung it at everything around me. The entire room was in ruins, when there was nothing left for me to smash. I coldly threw the club aside. Luis, his eyes red, walked toward me, as if to embrace me. Try touching me one more time. He had no choice but to lower his hands, his voice hoarse. I'm sorry, Jane. I overlooked your feelings. I didn't expect your reaction to be this intense. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said those things. Seeing that I didn't respond, Luis suddenly slapped himself and lowered his gaze. I'll never bring this up again. Will you forgive me? No, Luis. I was kidnapped because I was your girlfriend. I went through all of that because of you. You have to pay the price. Only then would it be fair. Chapter 11. After leaving Luis's place, I went to the house my parents had left behind before going abroad. They had been assigned to expand overseas markets and had been gone for 3 years. After cleaning up the place, I went into the bathroom. When the warm water from the shower fell densely over my body, I couldn't help but shiver. It felt like the hands that had fallen on me that day. I couldn't even be sure whose they were. My senses became infinitely heightened in that instant, and I let out a hoarse cry. Ah! My hands moved frantically, scrubbing every part of my body with force, as if punishing myself. Luis, you won't die a good death. I crouched in the corner of the bathroom, hugging myself. My fingertips dug into my flesh until traces of blood seeped out. After a long while, I returned to the bedroom and picked up my phone. I opened my browsing history from earlier news articles. Title: Woman going out late at night followed and assaulted by a man. I didn't read the article itself and went straight to the comments. Can they even write headlines? She was just going out normally and got assaulted by a creep. I'm standing right here today. Let's see who dares to blame the girl. I hope this girl can move on. Don't live in pain. And don't punish yourself for someone else's wrongdoing. I read them one by one, tears falling onto the screen. No one would have thought. The thing supporting me, my emotional pillar, came from certain comments online. I watched them get pushed to the top, with tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of likes and replies. It felt as if so many people were standing with me, validating me, comforting me, helping me suppress, again and again, the rising waves of self-doubt and self-loathing, letting me know that I wasn't walking this path alone. Chapter 12. Luis sent me meaningless, empty messages every single day. Nothing more than confessions of love and apologies, useless words. I quickly pulled myself together and regained my composure. One evening, I went downstairs to Luis's apartment. After confirming that his lights were on, I immediately drove to his company. After being with Luis for so long, some of his co-workers knew me. Andy, Luis has been leaving early and coming back late these days. Did he meet some new friends at work? I deliberately emphasized the words new friends. Andy let out a casual laugh. Jane, don't overthink it. Luis keeps himself very disciplined at work. He doesn't let any girls get close to him. The reason he's been coming in early and leaving late is because of this Friday's contract signing. He's been busy with this project for months. Jane, you're really overthinking it. I suddenly looked enlightened, my face showing a hint of embarrassment. Looks like I was being paranoid. Then I handed him the card I was holding. Andy, this is a shopping card a friend gave me. There's 1,000 in it. It's about to expire, and I don't really need anything. You can give it to your girlfriend. He hesitated for a moment before taking it, and only then did I smile and speak. Don't tell Luis I came by today. I don't want him to overthink things. Andy seemed to realize something belatedly and smiled as well. Got it. The most lethal way to hurt someone is to strike at what matters most to them. And I was already looking forward to Friday. Chapter 13. That Friday, the sun blazed fiercely overhead. I sat at the bow of the boat and sent Luis a photo. Half a minute later, he called. Luis, want to guess how deep the sea is here? I turned back with a smile and looked at the other person on the boat. Luis's mother. Jane, are you calling Luis? Her hearing wasn't great, so her voice was a bit loud. Loud enough for Luis on the other end to hear. I smiled and nodded at her. Auntie, can you swim? I asked Luis with a hint of interest. Jane, you're taking revenge on me. His tone was certain. Yes. I admitted calmly. Are you really going to go sign that contract and leave your mother here with me at sea without a worry? If you have something against me, come at me. My mom has never hurt you. He sounded like he was grinding his teeth. I blinked. Do you think you're in any position to reason with me right now? After saying that, I hung up. I sent Luis the location, then continued taking photos of his mother, who was happily posing. Jane, do I look good like this? I raised my voice and replied, you look great. An hour later, Luis's mother and I were already back on shore, drinking coconut juice. Luis arrived in a rush at that moment. His forehead was covered in sweat, looking rather disheveled. Missing the signing meant that the deal he had worked on for months was completely ruined, even if the other company was still willing to cooperate without holding it against him. His superiors would never hand the project to him again. Luis! He looked his mother up and down several times, only relaxing after confirming she was fine. Mom, I need to talk to Jane about something. Go wait for me in the car. He stared at me in silence. Only after his mother left did he speak. Jane, are you satisfied now? I shook my head honestly. This was only the beginning. I've always loved you. He looked at me steadily and continued. Jane, what exactly is the knot in your heart? If it's Aurelia, I can tell you, I haven't had any real relationship with her since I've been with you. Right. Kissing apparently didn't count as a real relationship. If it's about that day, I know it caused you real harm. The only thing I can do is make it up to you. I swear, from now on, every single day, I'll stay by your side and help you get through it, okay? It was absurd. Even now, he still didn't treat what I had gone through as something truly important. Luis let out a heavy sigh. I really do love you, and I truly want to marry you. Jane, can you give me one more chance? At this point, Luis was already showing a clear emotional split. On one hand, he was bothered by what happened and saw me as tainted. On the other hand, he still loved me in contradiction. That day, my answer to him was, Luis, marry you? Over my dead body. There was pain in his eyes as he left. Stumbling slightly, people are contradictory by nature, like Luis. And like me, I hated Luis to my core. Yet I had never intended to hurt his mother. When I went to pick her up that day, I hadn't planned to show her any kindness. But the first thing she said when she saw me was, Jane, when we video called last night, I noticed you'd lost so much weight. I got up early this morning and stewed a hen for you. Come in and have some soup before you go to the seaside. I went to pick her up at 8 a.m., which meant she had woken up at least at 5 to prepare that soup. Later, I often reflected on it. Maybe I shouldn't have softened toward Luis's family. Maybe that was what gave him the chance to hurt me again. Chapter 14. Aurelia's act had been convincing enough to fool me back then. That kidnapping had been planned by her and Luis's rival from the very beginning. She was certain Luis would choose to save her. Maybe it's true that the brain chooses to forget pain. My memory of that day had already become blurred. Or rather, I hadn't noticed at all. They had recorded a video. When Aurelia sent it to me, my mind went completely blank. I stared mechanically at the message that followed. Sent to everyone. Oh right. Forgot to tell you. Luis saw it too, and he agreed to me releasing the video publicly. You have no idea what Luis looked like watching the whole thing. He thought you were disgusting. You know? He even threw up holding a trash can. She went on and on after that, saying things like how that day in the car at the parking lot, they had never planned to stop at just kissing. I looked at those neatly arranged words, but couldn't piece them into a coherent sentence. My eyes were fixed only on the words released publicly, my whole body turning cold, like being locked in a pitch-black ice cellar, suffocating in the freezing cold. Subconsciously, I turned off my phone, cutting myself off from the outside world. I didn't dare to look at where exactly Aurelia had posted the video. Instead, my gaze fell on the fruit knife in the fruit basket on the coffee table. After a long while, I finally moved, as the thick scent of blood began to spread. Hurried knocking sounded at the door. Jane! Jane! Open the door! I need to talk to you. Don't listen to Aurelia's nonsense. I've already made her delete the video. Please open the door, okay? I'm begging you, don't hurt yourself. His words came fast and frantic. There was even a trace of a sob in his voice. I dropped the knife, letting the blood drip down my arm. I walked to the door, but didn't open it. Only confusion filled my mind. Luis, Aurelia said you thought I was dirty, so disgusting it made you sick. Then why are you here now, acting all affectionate? I'm sorry. Jane, I don't despise you. Will you listen to me? That was just an instinctive reaction. I don't think you're dirty. Really? What a load of lies. I stared at the door, using the last shred of my sanity to accuse him, and to comfort myself. Luis, you don't have the right to despise me either. You and Aurelia are dirtier than I am. What gives you the right? Huh? I pounded on the door, blood smearing across it. What gives you the right to use purity as the only standard? To judge whether a girl is clean or not? Jane, don't do this, please. You're scaring me. Luis frantically twisted the doorknob, ignoring my curses as he begged. Luis, listen carefully. You and Aurelia will go to hell, because I will be the one to send you there, beyond redemption. After saying that, I called the property management. Soon, security arrived and dragged Luis away. Chapter 15. The house fell silent once again. I calmly treated and bandaged my wounds. This time, I only broke down for a short while before forcing myself back to rationality. What else could I do? Let myself go insane? Every second I wasted on emotions was another second for Aurelia to revel in it. I now had evidence that Aurelia had spread the video, but I still couldn't prove her involvement in the kidnapping. Calling the police now wouldn't be the best option. I organized my thoughts, turned my phone back on, and was just about to contact Andy, even though Luis had quickly forced Aurelia to delete the video. Its momentum had already spread across major platforms at the speed of the internet. I accidentally tapped on a news notification that popped up. Title: A woman spreads private video of her boyfriend's ex. The article was almost entirely text, without a single image. But the comment section didn't spare me. I've had the honor of seeing the video, let's just say it was absolutely wild. Hee hee. I've got the original video. Follow me in DM, I won't even charge a cent. Send it to me. Me too. Please. I instinctively threw my phone away and collapsed onto the sofa, trembling. Maybe dying would bring instant relief. If I were dead, I wouldn't have to care about what others thought. Whether they had seen the video or not, none of it would matter anymore. I repeated to myself over and over, calm down, calm down. It's not my fault. I don't need to feel ashamed. It's not my fault, it's theirs. Stop thinking, just don't look at it. As I kept repeating those words, a tear suddenly fell onto the back of my hand. Only then did I realize I had been crying without noticing. The air fell silent for a second before I slowly pulled my thoughts back together. I pinched my arm hard, took a deep breath, and forced the tears back. Do something useful, Jane. What's the point of crying? Aurelia and the others are probably thrilled right now. I started talking to myself again, trying to brainwash my own thoughts. Chapter 16. Facing this hurdle head-on was too difficult. In the end, I chose to avoid it. I cut myself off from the internet and stayed home all day. During the first few days, Luis still came to my door. Sometimes he begged me for forgiveness. Other times, he muttered under his breath, as if blaming me for treating him this way. Occasionally, he mentioned the mastermind behind the kidnapping. Luis said he wouldn't let him go. I began to sense that something wasn't right. Luis's emotions shifted rapidly at times, sometimes even to extremes. It wasn't until much later that I realized. Back then, he was already showing signs of mild schizophrenia. What I never expected was that I was the trigger. Chapter 17. If I didn't go out or use the internet, nothing would ever progress. After another round of mental preparation, one evening, I put on a mask and a baseball cap and finally went out. Fortunately, I had changed to a new car before. Luis had never seen it. I followed him from when he left work all the way to his apartment building, and didn't notice anything unusual. Just as I was about to leave, Aurelia walked past my car, carrying an elegant shopping bag. Luis! Instinctively, I lowered my seat and hid in the shadows. Luis didn't look well, his expression stiff, his face slightly pale. What are you doing here? He frowned. Aurelia looked aggrieved. You got promoted to general manager, so I bought you a suit as a gift. I don't need it. Luis's coldness made Aurelia's eyes redden. Are you still blaming me for releasing the video? But didn't you agree to it at the beginning? What's the point of regretting it now? Jane will never forgive you anyway. The atmosphere around Luis instantly turned icy. He suddenly raised his hand and grabbed Aurelia by the throat. Luis! Aurelia's incredulous voice snapped him back to reality. Luis froze, then slowly released his grip, took a step back, and turned to leave in a daze. I had to admit, at the moment he let go, I felt a trace of disappointment. But what caught my attention more was something else. After making such a major mistake in a business deal, Luis had still been promoted to general manager. As I was thinking about it, my gaze unintentionally fixed on something. Behind the building in front of me stood a man. He was also wearing a cap and a mask. It seemed like he was staring in the direction Luis had left. The moment I saw his eyes, I froze completely. The scene I least wanted to remember flooded back like a tidal wave. He was the mastermind of the kidnapping, Luis's sworn enemy, and the very first man who had torn at my clothes. Fear was the only thing left in my mind. I crouched down in the car, trembling uncontrollably, burying my face in my arms. I hugged myself tightly. Please, let me go. I'm begging you. I can give you money. I don't want money. I just want to know how good Luis's girlfriend feels. Please. Don't. Help. Stop screaming. Once the guys take turns, we'll let you go. I'm only the first. Heh. Then I'll go second. Why do you get to be second? I felt cold all over and held myself even tighter. I knew my mental state had become distorted, teetering on the edge of collapse every day. I didn't know how much longer I could hold on. After a long time, I finally snapped back to reality and returned to the driver's seat. All three of them were already gone. Chapter 18. The man who had disappeared for so long had reappeared. The reason wasn't hard to guess. He hadn't let go of his hatred for Luis more than anyone. He wanted to see Luis suffer, but Luis's steady rise had reignited his resentment, and it made him expose himself. Chapter 19. Things turned out to be simpler than I had imagined, and the progress was faster than I expected. After following Aurelia just once, everything became clear. After Aurelia met with Luis's rival, although they lowered their voices slightly, they showed no real caution. In just one meeting, they revealed everything. They talked not only about the kidnapping, but also about Luis's promotion. During one night when Luis was drunk, Aurelia took care of him and secretly used his fingerprint to unlock his phone. And indeed, there were problems: bribing accountants, falsifying accounts, manipulating the market, deliberately creating the illusion that their company was thriving, deceiving numerous clients. As a result, Luis's project success rate skyrocketed, ranking first. That was what pushed him into the position of general manager. I stood at the entrance of the police station, looking at the national emblem above. It felt as if I could already see the fate awaiting Luis and the others. After a moment, I steadied myself and walked inside. I took off the mask and cap I had grown used to wearing. My voice trembled. Hello. I'd like to report a crime. Chapter 20. Whether as the plaintiff or merely as an observer, I witnessed almost everyone's sentencing, except for Aurelia. Perhaps she had sensed something, or perhaps she had noticed certain clues. By the time the police arrived at her home, she was already gone. Aurelia was immediately put on the wanted list. At that moment, I knew this wasn't over yet. But before I could make my next move, my parents suddenly returned to the country. My mother hugged me tightly, tears streaming down her face. Jane. My father looked exhausted as well. They had also found out about the video. Just as a long-lost warmth began to rise in my heart, my mother spoke. Jane, come abroad with us. I didn't understand. I don't want to go abroad. I still have things I haven't finished here. You still want to stay in this country? Do you even know your video has gone completely viral? My mother was even more distraught than I had been at my lowest point. How can you act like nothing happened? She almost gritted her teeth as she said the last words. Do you have no sense of shame? I froze, and after a long moment, slowly raised my head to meet her eyes. She covered her face, sobbing, tears slipping through her fingers. I don't have a choice either. Relatives have been calling me non-stop asking about this. How am I supposed to say it? That my daughter was. If you stay here any longer, your whole life will be ruined. Your father and I will never be able to hold our heads up in front of others again. I looked at her, my dry lips parting slightly. I wanted to say, I wasn't ruined. I just hadn't fully healed yet. But I still longed for the future. I was trying so hard to save myself. I would have a new life, a new beginning. I also wanted to tell her that I had already sent almost all the people who hurt me to prison. I hadn't given up on myself. Could they not give up on me too? But just as I opened my mouth, Mom, the woman in front of me collapsed, unable to hold on. My father caught her in time and sighed as he looked at me. Jane, why can't you be more considerate of your mother? Do you know how much pressure she's under from others? I could no longer bring myself to defend myself. My parents, who had returned from abroad, wore the most fashionable clothes, had received advanced education, and carried themselves with the kind of poise expected in modern society. Yet their thinking remained trapped in certain outdated and harmful beliefs. Chapter 21. My mother developed high blood pressure because of me. I had no choice but to give in. Sitting on the plane to Melbourne, I felt completely numb. Before this, Luis had asked Andy to pass along a message. He wanted to see me. Jane. Luis doesn't look like he's doing well. Maybe you should go see him? I rejected it without hesitation and hung up. Not doing well didn't mean he was about to die. If it were the latter, I would have gladly gone to see him. Andy later sent me a message. He told me that after paying compensation, Luis had left all his remaining money to me. This time, I didn't refuse. I spent all of it on promoting Aurelia's wanted notice. I pushed for widespread sharing of the official police announcement, letting more people see what Aurelia looked like. Until the day she was caught, she would live like a rat in the gutter, never seeing the light of day. Sitting high above in the sky, I looked down at the city through the airplane window. I knew that sooner or later, I would come back to finish what I had left undone. Chapter 22. This was my 3rd year in Melbourne. I glanced at the letter in my hand, not even interested in opening it. This was the 6th one Luis had sent me. Since he was released from prison half a year ago, he had been writing to me once every month. He had been diagnosed with schizophrenia, though it was still manageable with medication. Thinking about it now, it was almost laughable. The trigger for his illness was actually me. 2 conflicting emotions, disgust and affection, tore at his mind. Every day, he lived under the torment of these extremes. On one hand, Luis would recall the video he had seen and feel so sick he would throw up. On the other hand, he would feel heartbroken for me, regretting that he hadn't protected me. What kind of trash was he? I casually tossed the letter into the trash. That moment was seen by Lillian, who had just come downstairs, dragging her slippers. She rushed down with loud steps. Did that psycho send you another letter again? I hesitated for a moment, then nodded. Lillian's eyes instantly reddened. Sister, you've changed. You're secretly accepting his letters and not telling me. Before I could say anything, she threw herself into my arms with a wail. Her soft short hair brushed against my neck. I don't care, you have to hug me to make me feel better. I smiled faintly and patted her back. You're such a handful, I said helplessly. She acted shamelessly. I am. Lillian was the daughter of a Chinese psychologist I found in Melbourne. The first time I met her, she had short hair and a slightly androgynous look. She was chewing bubble gum and froze for a second when she saw me. The gum popped and stuck to her lips, but she didn't care at all. She just stared at me. After a moment, she broke into a grin. Sister, you're so pretty. Later, Lillian became one of the few friends I had in Melbourne. On the surface, she seemed carefree and indifferent to everything, but once she got home, she would cling to my arm, acting spoiled and chattering endlessly. To a large extent, Lillian filled my life. It was no longer dull or monotonous, but that didn't mean I had become immersed in this life and forgotten everything back home. 3 years of psychological counseling had made me let go of many things. I hadn't forgotten what happened, I just no longer trapped myself in it. When I learned that Aurelia had recently appeared near Luis's house, I booked a ticket back home. The only unexpected thing was that Lillian insisted on going back with me. She glared at me angrily. Wow, Jane, you were going to sneak back home without telling me? You're done for the next 3 days. I'm not calling you sister anymore. When I get back, I'll have tons of sisters. You'll regret it. And then you'll have to chase me all the way to the crematorium to win me back. I won't forgive you easily. Soon enough, I found out from her father. She really did have a lot of sisters. 4 cousins on her mother's side, 3 on her father's side, and 1 biological sister. I was speechless. She claimed it would be hard to forgive me. But the moment I agreed to let her stay at my house back home, she started chattering again, calling me sister every other sentence, as if she had never been angry at all. Chapter 23. After getting off the plane, Lillian was immediately taken away by her family to reunite for a few days. When I took a taxi to my current residence, Luis seemed to have been waiting downstairs for a long time. The moment he saw me, his eyes lit up, but the curve of his lips slowly flattened under my indifferent gaze. In Melbourne, do I have a friend around you? I looked at him with a faint, knowing smile. Otherwise, how would he know I was coming back today? Luis didn't answer. He just looked at me deeply. Then he slowly spoke. Jane, I missed you. I let out a soft laugh and looked at him leisurely. Luis, Do you still want to be with me? He swallowed before nodding tightly, his eyes filled with caution. I frowned and took a step back, as if afraid of being contaminated. But you have a mental illness. Luis looked hurt and lowered his gaze, speaking softly in defense. I'll take my medication on time. Could you stay a bit farther away from me? I'm actually quite scared of people with mental disorders, I said, unable to hide the disgust in my tone. Luis's face turned pale. In the end, he said nothing and left. I watched his back and let out a faint scoff. Luis, do you know what humiliation feels like now? When I saw the disgust on your face back then, it hurt 10,000 times more than this. 3 years of living like a rat in hiding had already pushed Aurelia to the brink of collapse. Whether she hoped Luis would help her, or dreamed of getting back together with him, either way, she had set her sights on him. But she was still cautious. Although the police had detected her movements, they had never managed to catch her. And that was exactly the opportunity one had been waiting for. An opportunity one had waited 3 years for. Chapter 24. After 3 years apart, Luis had grown much thicker-skinned. Even after I had said such humiliating things to him, he acted as if nothing had happened. Sometimes he would stand near my house, watching me from a distance. Other times, he would block my way, handing me breakfast or a bouquet of flowers. Without exception, every single one ended up being thrown back in his face. That day, unfortunately, Lillian had come back with me. She happened to see Luis downstairs holding a bouquet of roses. Lillian had a fiery temper. She rushed over and started scolding him. By the time I noticed something was wrong with Luis, it was already too late. There was a violent glint in his eyes as he stared at Lillian without blinking, a sign he was losing control. While Lillian kept ranting, he suddenly shoved the flowers in his hand straight into her mouth. The movement was rough and brutal. The rose stems were covered in sharp thorns, cutting Lillian's lips. Luis, are you crazy? Let go of her. He didn't react at all. In a moment of urgency, I picked up a stone and smashed it against his hand without hesitation. Only then was Luis forced to stop. The pain gradually brought his rationality back. The back of his hand was scraped raw, but he didn't care. He just looked at me deeply. I helped Lillian up, frowning at the wound on her lips. Taking a deep breath, I met Luis's gaze. Luis, tell me something. For someone like you, a piece of trash, what's the point of you even being alive? I turned my eyes away, unwilling to look at him any longer, and supported Lillian as we left. Jane. Luis's voice was hoarse, his tone unreadable, as if he had only called out my name casually. Get lost. I didn't look back. After taking Lillian to get treated, I still sent her back to her own home. Sister. She couldn't speak clearly, only tugging at my clothes pitifully. I sighed and said gently, stay home and recover first. I'll come get you after a while. Her eyes lit up with a smile again. Don't lie to me. I won't. I thought Luis wouldn't show up again for a long time, but the very next day, he was standing downstairs at my place again. His expression showed no obvious abnormality. I'm sorry, Jane. I shouldn't have acted like that yesterday. I bought some medicine, see if it's useful. I didn't take the bag he handed over. I just looked at him for a couple of seconds. So this was Luis after his illness? His emotions fluctuated wildly. Beneath a seemingly normal exterior, everything inside had already rotted. Luis, do you think you owe me? That's why you want to make it up to me? I asked. He nodded without hesitation, then added, and I still love you. I curved my lips into a smile. That's right, Luis. You have to remember this. You owe me. He nodded seriously. Chapter 25. Aurelia finally couldn't hold back anymore. I had a vague feeling that someone had been following me for days. That night, it was 11 p.m. As I walked home, there were barely any pedestrians on the street. Instinctively, I turned around. No one. But when I turned back, I saw another shadow under the streetlight, besides my own. My eyes widened. Before I could run, someone covered my mouth and nose and dragged me away. I was thrown onto an empty, desolate patch of land. A man and a woman stood in front of me. The voice was familiar. Jane, how about reliving what happened 3 years ago? Think of it as my repayment for hiding because of you for 3 years. Aurelia crouched in front of me, holding up her phone. Her tone carried a hint of regret. Too bad there aren't enough people this time, just one. But it should be enough to satisfy you, right? She smiled. The strange man began walking toward me. His cloudy eyes were filled with lechery. My wrists and ankles were bound. My eyes full of panic. I cried out, "No! Please, don't!" Just as he pinned me to the ground, another voice roared, "Try touching her and see what happens." Luis rushed in, picking up a wooden stick and swinging it hard at the man's back. "Luis?" Aurelia cried out in shock. "Luis! Help me!" Lying on my side on the ground, I looked at him through tears. "This time, don't abandon me again, okay?" His eyes reddened. "I won't. Jane, I won't. I won't let something like that happen to you again." The man staggered to his feet, grappling with Luis. Seeing Luis starting to lose the upper hand, I struggled against the rope binding my wrists. The rope didn't come loose, but the small knife I kept hidden in my sleeve slipped out, landing right at Luis's feet. The crisp sound caught his attention. "Help me, Luis! What do we do? Are we not going to make it out of here?" My voice trembled, my face pale. Luis looked at me intensely, as if making a vow. "I promise, something like that will never happen again." Then he picked up the knife and drove it deep into the man's chest. As if it wasn't deep enough, he pushed it in even further. "Ah!" Aurelia dropped her phone, staring at the man as his life faded, screaming in terror. Luis had killed someone. I turned to Aurelia, sniffing softly. "Aurelia, you won't tell anyone, right? You've already hurt me. But you used to love Luis so much, you can't ruin him too. If you tell, his whole life will be over." Luis slowly turned his gaze toward Aurelia, like he was looking at a dead person. Aurelia's legs had gone so weak she couldn't even stand. The knife in Luis's hand was still dripping blood. He crouched in front of her, his tone calm. "I've thought about it. If it weren't for you, Jane and I wouldn't have ended up like this. Jane and I were both ruined by you." Aurelia shook her head weakly, retreating on the ground. "What are you saying, Luis? Get a hold of yourself." She had already realized something was wrong. His illness had flared up. Luis couldn't hear her anymore. He played with the knife in his hand. Before Aurelia could react, he stabbed her. But Luis was inexperienced. It wasn't a fatal blow. Aurelia's body convulsed. Unable to speak, Luis placed his hand on her neck, looking down at her from above. His grip tightened gradually. Moments later, the woman stopped breathing. Luis let go. Her head fell limply to the side, facing me. Her eyes were wide open, unblinking even in death. I looked at her for 2 seconds, then blinked. Chapter 26. Luis walked over, his hands and clothes covered in blood. There were even a few splashes on his face. "Jane, the people who hurt you. I've killed them all." I neither agreed nor denied it. I just looked at him with concern. "Then what are you going to do now?" At the peak of madness, he instead became calm. Luis stood up and walked toward the 2 bodies. "After I deal with them, I'll take you away from here." Just as he finished speaking, the piercing sound of sirens suddenly rang out. The police arrived quickly. Luis gave a bleak smile. "Looks like I can't escape, Jane. I can't take you with me anymore," he said, his voice filled with despair. The red and blue lights flashed across his face. I looked up at him and blinked. Chapter 27. Although Luis had schizophrenia, it wasn't severe enough to exempt him from criminal responsibility. He was sentenced to 15 years. I chose a sunny day with a gentle breeze to visit him in prison. "Jane, if I behave well, I might get a reduced sentence. Maybe it won't even take 15 years before I smiled and interrupted him. "What does that have to do with me?" He froze, as if he couldn't understand what I meant. I curved my lips and tilted my head at him. "That knife, was it really such a coincidence that it fell right by your feet?" I also wanted to tell him that it was me who called the police, but after glancing at the guard behind him, I swallowed those words. No need to bring trouble upon myself. That vague sentence alone was enough for Luis to realize the truth. He looked at me in disbelief, unable to say a word. I shrugged, smiled, and waved at him before leaving. On the way back, the thought of his expression made me laugh out loud. How naive of him to think I would forgive him. The resentment I had carried for 3 years finally dissipated. Just as I was about to call Lillian, a call appeared on the car's display screen. I let it ring, only answering right before it automatically hung up. Jane. I didn't respond, my fingers tapping lightly on the steering wheel. Mom just wanted to ask, will you come back for Mid-Autumn Festival? My expression didn't change. I probably won't have time. I learned to make mooncakes this year. You like egg yolk filling, right? I can make them myself and send them to you, okay? I sighed softly, feeling a bit helpless. That really won't be necessary. There was a long silence on the other end before she spoke again. Jane, are you still blaming Mom? Well, I cut her off. I'm driving right now. If there's nothing else, I'll hang up. Half a minute later, the call ended. I turned the steering wheel, my expression completely unchanged. To say I didn't blame her would be a lie. I had once hurt myself because of those videos. I had broken down because of everything that happened. But no one knew. The only time I truly wanted to end my life was because of what my mother said. In her eyes, I was ruined, shameless, someone who made them too ashamed to hold their heads up. That was the moment I truly understood. Almost everyone stood against me. I walked alone against the current, with no one behind me. Chapter 28. When I came back to my senses, I realized I had missed 2 calls from Lillian. As soon as I answered the third one, her voice nearly burst through the speaker. Jane, you're ignoring my calls again. Her energy made me smile. I'm coming to pick you up now. Her anger vanished instantly. Okay, hurry up and come get me. I'm waiting for you, sister. After hanging up, I overturned my earlier conclusion. At least now, I was no longer alone. The person standing beside me, her name was Lillian.